And we're live. Hi, everyone. Thank you once again for coming for yet another episode where we talk about different things in GTM, different channels, and we talk with industry experts. And today we have an expert with us who is putting together a great event around World Cup FIFA. And this is like super exciting. She's been telling me about it. And all the learnings, all the insights, all the different things, and how to make a profitable event. Because I think this is one thing which also came up as a question a lot of times, that events are they just they just drain the money out of your budget, and what there's nothing to show for it. That is one very common sentiment. And LaShanda, we're going to put you on the spot and we're going to ask all these difficult questions, because that is the purpose of this live, that any no question is not important or embarrassing. Please ask all embarrassing questions, because that's why we have the experts here. So I'll quickly introduce LaShanda, the official introduction, that she's the founder and CEO of No Ceiling Collective. She spent 20 plus years turning events from cost centers into revenue engines, exactly what we want to talk about today, launching Mailchimp's global event practice and leading experiential strategy at HP and the Home Depot along the way. So today she works with tech startups, Fortune 500 company, and D2C brands to build event programs that show up in the pipeline. So startups and Fortune 500. So you can imagine the amount of experience that she comes with. So make use of this half an hour. Please drop in your questions. I, of course, have a long list of questions, but in case you have any particular question, please drop in the comments. Welcome to the live, Lashanda. So happy to have you here. Tell us something about your journey and just like, let's start. We want this to be a
Yeah.
conversation. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Swati, for having me. Oh my gosh, where do I start? Just in terms of like the event, you want to kind of just,
Yeah,
yeah,
sure. So, I mean, the topic of the today itself is that what should be the ROI framework. And like one thing about your introduction, and something that I mentioned at the start of this live, that events are thought of as cost centers. And how do you turn that into revenue engines? And how do you even think of ROI when it comes to event? You have to spend so much of money. So, how do you
yeah.
structure this entire piece? So, let's break down the title and start from there. And what made you get into events? What excited you about this entire piece?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so much there. I think just the notion about events as a cost center. I think if we all are just being honest with ourselves and we're doing events, that's the narrative that we as marketing professionals, event professionals, revenue leaders, that's what we hear behind the scenes, right? It's like, oh my gosh, this event costs, or this sponsorship for this trade show or something costs so much. What did we get from it, right? But ultimately, I think it comes down to what your goals are with the event, and just having clarity around that. And so, while a lot of times people say brand awareness, is like something that they may want to focus on, the translation of that is we live in a capitalistic society. So ultimately, there's commercial goals. And so when I hear that, the first thing I say is, okay, we need to drive, new pipeline. Right. So if they say brand awareness, ultimately you can accomplish that. But ultimately, I'm like, they want access to new customer set. And so we should be thinking about how are we driving a new pipeline? That's the first goal. The second one is deal acceleration. And a lot of times, I think event professionals and even marketing professionals to a large degree don't get or take credit for the fact that they may be helping accelerate deals that may have stalled. People don't necessarily have their relationships, and ultimately, their clients may be looking at a few alternatives, and it could be just that human touch that
Yes.
could be the opportunity for closing, or being said, hey, we decided to go with someone else. And so the second goal I think about is deal acceleration, and how are you optimizing towards that goal. And then the last one that I see sometimes with events is just around building like customer relationships, because customers do have choice. And ultimately, if you have an existing customer base, how are you maintaining those relationships? Everything feels at times like very transactional, but it's like, I think it's an easier example in the tech community, where having customer education, and customer success managers and different, giving them opportunities to interact with customers. So those are kind of the three goals that I look around: new pipeline, deal acceleration, and ultimately, I'm going to call the last one like the customer relationship, and making sure that they're not churning and that they're actually, seeing value and feeling supported.
That's so amazing because they're all like legit revenue KPIs and not really. Because when we talk about events, the first thing in mind is brand awareness. Oh, you'll have so much of reach. Oh, you'll have so many views, so many eyeballs. Like that's another one. Eyeballs, eyeballs. And but eyeballs don't really translate into revenue. You gotta make it needs to make sense. Definitely you need impressions. You need to reach out to more people. But so I think you've created something called the event pipeline creation framework. And
Mhm.
because we're talking about revenue pipeline and we're talking about deal acceleration, can you run us through that? Because these are very important pointers, but marketers, when they think of event, they don't think about deal pipeline. They actually think of awareness. They feel it's more top of the funnel. But you're mentioning things which are not so much top of the funnel, which are more medium and bottom of the funnel, like legit converting the customers. So can you
Yeah.
talk us through this framework of yours so that people get more clarity on how to look at events?
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned, I over 20 something years, and I actually started my career in sales before I actually went into marketing. And I had a long marketing career doing digital marketing and basically all the disciplines, but ultimately finding events. Um, I would say that I made the mistake over 20 something years, just like a lot of other people. You may not call it a mistake, but I think you ultimately need to know your audience. So when I think about the framework, it's really, if you, as marketers, right, we do look at brand awareness, we do look at other signals to say, are we moving people from top of funnel to middle of funnel to bottom of funnel so that they can become a conversion? But the executives in the company, the sales leaders, the CFO, when you're having to answer to these people because they're the ones that's giving you the budget or they're approving and green lighting your teams, and you may not even have a full event team, so there may be different people from different departments that are being on loan to you to help you with it. um, it's important to speak the language that is going to help translate and get you through some of the bureaucracy and red tape so that you can do what you need to do. And so this is coming from hard won lessons of know your audience. And so knowing your audience, you can kind of start with the end in mind. And that is knowing that there's a commercial opportunity on this. And the question is, are you helping to secure new business? Are you helping to close business that's already in pipeline? And how do you show the value that you're bringing to the organization? Or ultimately, was it a churn prevention opportunity because maybe there were signals that a customer was going to churn, but they came to your event or your thing and you were able to save this opportunity? So when you start to talk in revenue and contribution to that, it's not to say that those other things aren't important, but if you start with the end in mind in terms of planning, it helps you to manage all of the different stakeholders that are going to be a part of your experience. And so the very first part of the framework is around really setting the goals and getting a commitment and alignment with each of your stakeholders. And it starts with understanding who your stakeholders are and shopping those conversations. I like to do those. I used to do those back behind the scenes so that when you went into a meeting, it's not the first time somebody has heard it. They've warmed up to the idea. And so ultimately, it makes that process of gaining alignment and commitment on the goals a lot easier. So that's the first step. And then once you have that, and it's like gaining all the resources, like in terms of like people that you may need as part of your team. Sales is a part of that team. If you have a sales organization, I can't tell you how often I
Yeah.
made mistakes along the way of like having events and market. Like we were asked to do the events by the sales organization, but they had no skin in the game. And so when it came to doing the things that they should have done before the event in terms of building relationships or reaching out to people, if you knew somebody was going to be there that you wanted to meet with,
Yes.
Those things weren't happening. And then trying to close the deal on the event floor, it just didn't play out the way, that everybody, and then all of a sudden you got all these leads, nobody converted. And so we
Yes.
involved them in the planning from day one. And same goes for like customer success and all the other people, of making them part of your cross-functional team. Because the reality is, one department doesn't own it. It's, multiple people that have to be a part of events.
Yes, no, I completely agree. There's a question on around events on the scale of the event. So that's come into my DMs. And the question is that how do you decide, do I need to do a big event? Does a dinner count as an event, or just like a dinner meetup? And should we get our existing customers? You mentioned about customers coming to an event or sales closing deals, but we are
Mm-hmm.
told that in an event you should not focus on closing deals or talking business. It should just to be to make people comfortable. I think the question is around scale of event, which I agree we should be talking about, because a lot of people when they hear event, they think large scale event, they think Salesforce doing Dreamforce or HubSpot doing Unbound. But what should be the scale, and should dinner count as an event? And also, how do you think about business when you're not supposed to do business as at an event? Because it that also pisses people off. That did you call me to this dinner to talk business? Maybe you can just schedule a G meet. So what are your thoughts on that? Very valid question.
Yeah, I was laughing because I remember there was someone that posted on LinkedIn that I actually follow, and they got uninvited to like a dinner because I guess maybe they weren't the right target, which is like, do not do that because that left a bad taste in that person's mouth. And I can guarantee you that all the people who saw that post,
Oh God,
uh,
yeah.
the amount of advertising that was probably not good for them. But I would say, based on events, it's based off of your budget. I think that any budget, you can operate off any budget. I think it just depends ultimately on your goal and making sure that the event type that you're trying to do aligns with that. And so, dinners, executive dinners, VIP dinners or bespoke events, like where it's a small, intimate gathering. I know like right now around World Cup, people are getting suites and they're entertaining clients. So I think what that looks like could be very different. And that's just based off of the budget that you have. But I am a fan of intimate events. I think that, no, somebody should not feel like you're selling them. That is not my own personal sales philosophy either. I think people do business with human beings,
Mhm.
and I think you can have the best product in the world, but you need to be relatable. And I think that people need to understand. So there's like almost like you need to break the ice. You want to ask somebody to marry you on the first date. If you do, it might be a little cringe, as my kids call it. But if you were to have like an intimate dinner or kind of like a bespoke event where you actually get to know people, that really does help to break the ice. And if you're good at what you do, your products, your services, and things like that, that is like table stakes. But I think what takes it to the next level is the opportunity for them to interact with you and see what you're about. And do I want to partner with this person for, I'm assuming this may be a lengthy type of, opportunity that's more relationship based versus like a one-time hit that's very transactional. When it comes to trade shows and things like that, I find like people they want access to an audience that they don't have access to. And you may not be able to sponsor an event. My agency is about a year old, and I remember people reaching out to me and they wanted me to sponsor a booth, and it was 20 something thousand to sponsor the booth. And then it was like, I got to pay for the booth to be fabricated. I didn't want to do the pipe and drape and all the other stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, as a startup, I can't, does it even make sense? But what
Yeah.
does make sense is you and your team or a few people going on the event floor, talking to people, figuring out where like the little bespoke events where you can kind of go. having your cards, or if you're old school, actually, I did have cards,
Wow.
or the digital ones, like where you can do it with your phone, and just connecting with people live on the event floor.
Mhm.
Um, no one says that there's one way to do a trade show. If you are lucky enough that you can exhibit there, or you can get a speaking opportunity, um, those type of things, those also help. And then webinars, right? I mean, that those are great opportunities. I always believe that if you give something of value, people will reach back out. And so for me, webinars tend to be great opportunities for education,
Mhm.
and just kind of open the doors. And then you can always set up for the next thing, to graduate that relationship, because maybe you got a few leads from the webinar that people were like, hey, really enjoyed that, want to follow up with you. And then now you've had a break, ice break moment here where you can actually take it, and maybe the dinner's next. And hey, I'd like to invite you out. We're going to be in your city. And we actually met with people who had a similar problem. So maybe we can have a round table. And it doesn't have to just be one event. You can also stack events on top of each other so that you're progressively bringing people along with you versus talking at people.
That's so amazing, and that's so true. A lot of inbound happens. I mean, the purpose of the LinkedIn lives that I'm doing, it's just to get, like, the questions that people have, questions that I have around a lot of topics. And honestly, I
Mhm.
am saying I'm super selfish. I want my questions to be answered by the experts. So that's my agenda to do these to do these lives and webinars. And
Mhm.
honestly, like, there are a lot of people asking great questions, and I get to learn in the process. But at the same time, you're definitely right. A lot of people, like, I sometimes randomly get leads who refer to one of these sessions which they attended, and they're like, oh my god, what you guys discussed was so amazing and so true, and I implemented 1 2 3, which was the experts advice. And there they are talking to me about what I'm building and how we can collaborate. So it's
Mhm.
really amazing, and you get to meet so many different people. But I have a great question here. When you talked about, like, event, going to an event with your team, the question is, how can an introvert person leverage events? Should they even attend? So what's your thoughts on that one?
Interesting enough, I'm not sure what type of energy I give you, but this was the bright. This was like, I guess icebreakers is on the brain today, but this was one of the ones that was done in my baby shower, um, and the room was divided from people who I work with versus the people who really knew me. I am an introvert in my private life,
Okay.
um, and I actually produce events. I go to events, and I'm speaking with you today. There was a time where I wouldn't even do that. And so I say that because you may be an introvert, and I think you understand that. And there's two ways you can go about it. One is I can flex and I can, go and meet people and engage with them, but I have to have like a moment where I'm completely destimulated. So when trade shows or events have like those rooms that you can go, it might be a partnership with Headspace or Calm, or you just go somewhere where it's not a lot of lights, it's not a lot of people, just so that you can kind of find a way to relax. But that's one way. The other part is like, bring a wingman or a wing woman, and that person is just very talkative, and they can kind of help break the ice.
Yeah.
That's always been helpful. Or you just make sure that someone from your team that is engaging and can navigate, I'm going to call it productive small talk.
Yeah.
Because I think if you're an introvert, or some people, you're just like, I don't have time for those types of conversations, but I want something that's like meaningful and productive. I think having someone that you can designate, if you just really just clam up when you get in front of people. I hope that's helpful.
No, 100%. I think good, great pointers here. I mean, find your space, breathe in, breathe out, get back into the event. I think that's what I do. I mean, I thought for the best part of my life, I thought that I'm an extrovert. Then one of my friends told me, I don't think you're an extrovert. You don't share anything. You're an out and out introvert. You just, like, when you have to do something for work professionally, then you change your personality type and then you go and do it. And I agree, I do take those breathers. Like I've done three small talks, then I'll go to some corner, I'll take my coffee, deep breath in and out, and then get back into the conversation again. So I think great pointers. Get somebody in your team who's smart and who wants to do this. Okay, so we have another question here. We two questions. I'll take the first one first because that came in first. Should I conduct an event on my own, or should I do it in partnership with a community uh, who are talking to similar people or who have access to similar people, or should I do it on my own? So I think community, I think we can talk about Wednesday Women. These guys host amazing events. So
Yeah.
what's your take there, LaShanda?
I think it depends on a lot of variables, but ultimately the cost of which to produce it. So how many people are you looking to do the event, for? What are your goals? Does the partner add something of strategic value? Maybe they're bringing funds, or maybe they're bringing an audience that you want to get access to. Maybe they're really great at promoting events and getting, the right audience in the room. So I think when you kind of look at it from those different angles, it may make sense. Sometimes, like when we were talking about, personality types and things like that, I post a lot on LinkedIn, but a lot, I'm telling you, it's like, I just still, to this day, I'm always hesitating. But there was a post I did about trade shows and like whether or not you should rent an audience or own your own audience. You asked me earlier why I got into events. I've been doing events throughout the years, but I'll say that I took it more seriously when I worked for Mailchimp because it was COVID. We wanted to do a conference years ago. The brand was a really strong brand. Businesses shut down, and we wanted to kind of do something for the customers, and websites was something that we were bringing to the market. And so we decided, a lot of small business owners, if they weren't online or they didn't know how to market their business, that was an opportunity for us to do this webinar series to help drive education. And we did it. It was free to the customers. And the value that we got from that webinar, it was a huge hit. We had thousands. It was I think it was over 14 days. And we touched topics from building your website to getting drop shipments to, paid marketing or pay media, SEO. We touched every topic over that 14 days. We did it in multiple time zones. And so I think every session had probably over 2,000 to 5,000 people that were attending. That ended up being data that we were getting from the registration. And then those became opportunities for us to later on market to them. And we got, customers that tried our new website products. They signed up for our Mailchimp subscriptions. And so that is a great example of doing an owned event that happened to be low. I'm going to call it low fidelity in terms of like webinars were a little easier to execute. We had a strong brand, we promoted it, and we made it free. So people, and when you have consent, you always put in there, your information may be used for marketing. I think with GDPR, you kind of need to be clear about you're registering for the event and you are signing up for marketing, right? But ultimately, by doing that, we had an audience that we actually, owned data for and then could remarket to. And so when you're looking at whether or not to do an owned event, I do think it's valuable to do that, because when you're working with like a trade show or some kind of a event organizer, you're kind of at their mercy in terms of what data they will share with you. And some of them, I have had really bad experiences where they just gave me first and last name. And I was like, wait, we didn't get email, telephone number. We shared the goals that we were going to achieve. So how are we supposed to act on this data? I was like, well, we gave you first and last name. Oh, and we gave you their company name. So now
you go do and search yourself on Apollo and get kind of or Zoom info and get their details out. Wow.
you know, and before Apollo, it was like, you know, you're like the old school, like account-based marketing.
Yes.
And it was just a nightmare because you spend all this money sponsoring an event and or having a booth, and then you find out you couldn't get the data. Now that doesn't always happen, but I always say if you're going to participate in a trade show, ask for like an export of like what it will look like in terms of data that they were going to share with you, because a lot of times people don't find that out until after the fact.
Yes.
um, and that sours relationships with people actually wanting to participate in trade shows when they actually are pretty phenomenal if you know what you're doing and you plan effectively.
I completely agree. And I think the idea on thinking about an event online is also great, that it's cost effective and you own the audience, like you said. So that's a great way to kind of build your community and build an audience that you can talk to, who's relevant, who's your ICP. I have so many questions, but I will have to take audience questions because it's part of the whole thing. So, okay. So the question is, do you have checklist of talking points that can help convert people you talk to during the event and turn them into active pipeline without it looking like selling?
I always say, like, it depends on where you are in a relationship with them. If it's the first time that you're meeting them, um, asking or even like remotely feeling like salesy is going to be off-putting. What I always say is like, if you're going to an event and you know who is going there, try to connect with them before the event, whether
Mm.
that's like a quick, you know, coffee chat. If you're in the same city, maybe if there's an opportunity to meet them beforehand, so that you're having some level of rapport going into that event, so
Yes.
that by the time you get to the event, it's a natural transition to the next level. If it's the first time you're meeting them at the event, which is fine, um, try, like, your goal should be to get the next meeting.
Yeah.
And the next meeting could be, I would say, like, you know, keep it light. And
Mhm.
hey, just want to have a chat with you. Um, you shared you shared something interesting with me while we were here today. That a problem, and I've heard that from other clients that we've had. I'd love to maybe see if like maybe we could have a follow up discussion around
Mhm.
this. And I actually have someone that had that same issue. I'd love to introduce you to them. That conversation just did two things. One, it got you the meeting and like, hey, they care about this issue or this challenge that I'm having. And two, they gave me something that they didn't have to, which is that introduction with someone that can help me potentially solve it. And so now I'm looking at you very differently and like, what did you say you did again? Oh yeah, let's I want to introduce you to my person that's actually in, and now you've facilitated that relationship just from that interaction. But I think it's just really understanding where you are so that you know like what the goal is. And so in that case, for first time meeting someone, the goal is like to get the next meeting. For people who are already in the pipeline and you're having they already have evaluated your solutions, but the deal is stalled. I think that looks like you just having a good time or building rapport with them so that they see the who they're doing business with and whether or not they would want to do a long-term relationship. Because as much like we're emotional, I've been doing shopper marketing before I did this, and
Yeah.
I can tell you people's buying decisions are very irrational.
Mm. Yeah. I mean,
uh,
so
and if
true.
you
Yes.
move them emotionally, it's just a very different dynamic. And so for deal acceleration, I think that's where, you know, like I remember doing whiskey tasting, like for, you
Mhm.
know, like our sales organization. And it was like, and for people who actually love whiskey and actually were into that, that was a hit. Right. And so that gave the sales team like organic opportunity just to build relationships and enjoy an experience together, that, you know, to form a bond. And I think that that's a different angle based off of that. And then for customer education, I'll throw that one in really quickly. Like for customers that may be potentially about to churn, it could be that they just didn't understand how to use their solution. And so by you just taking the time to spend, you know, having a customer success manager or somebody there to talk to them and actually go through their account and then look at the things that they're struggling with, that could be the difference between somebody churning that was, $20,000 customer versus someone that you just saved. So I think when you look at it, those are probably just three, talking points across the three different set of goals that I shared earlier today.
This is really amazing because you actually gave real talking points. I think one very important thing for me to learn was that fine, I'm like listen more than you talk. Probably that's what I understood, because you're talking, you want them to talk about their problems so that you can offer them something. And the second, so when you listen, then you will be able to give something before you look like you're asking, or you look like you're trying to selling or get something from them, because that's
Mhm.
when trust gets developed. And yeah, definitely a sale is like a transactional thing, but the decision making is driven through an emotional, that angle. Oh, am I vibing with this person? Can I trust this person? So if intuitively I trust a person, then only I go ahead and give you that second meeting, and the KPI becomes the second meeting. Like, you put it so beautifully. Thank you so much, Lashonda. But one thing, you talked about an ROI calculator,
Mhm.
which because I think we've been discussing that instead of looking at just impressions and brand awareness, you should look at pipeline or actual deal, like revenue movement,
Mhm.
as ROI from an event. And you did talk about a pipeline calculator. Can you tell us how did you go about creating it, because it's something very interesting, and we would be sharing that calculator with all the people who folks who've joined in today. So how did
Yeah.
you get to?
So interesting enough, I have always planned events, and it was always like our executives, hey, we have a new product launch, or we have these other things that are going on. And so when I talked about goal setting at the top, the top of the call, um, if I had known what the goals were, I would have pressed and asked different questions about ultimately, like, what is a realistic, like, what does success look like to you on the other side of this? If we got, what is the revenue number that we're trying to do, or how much in net new pipeline are we trying to drive? I would have approached that planning process very differently. So I built an event pipeline calculator that takes all of these learnings through the years across different types of events, whether it's trade shows, conferences, webinars, you name it. I put this. I've done two modes of it. One is like a planning mode. So if you're planning an event, it asks you to put some inputs in there, and then it'll spit out whether or not it's a great opportunity for you to do it, or it'll give you some feedback on things that you may want to look at. And then I also have measurement mode, which is if you're doing a post-mortem of an event, you already probably know what went well and what didn't, but you can put it in there. And so there's some industry benchmarks and things like that that you can kind of look at. Okay, this is probably what we're going to do the next time. And so at least you're going into it with a different planning mindset. I'm available, and my team and I are actually thinking about just doing like deep dive education series, because we didn't talk about when you get leads, how do you work those leads and all these other things. But there's so many tangents to this conversation that would be beneficial. But we started with the calculator, and so we're providing that as just free of charge for people who are doing events. If you can benefit from the learnings, it's great. And then also, if you're having those discussions between, do we put money in paid media or should we do events? There are like some fun comparisons about customer acquisition costs in there, so that you can see like how much you would put in paid media. Or I could do this event and I could do that, and I actually have data from it. So it's just I hope you all enjoy it, but it was a labor of love.
I'm definitely trying this out, because there are so many questions around budgeting. I mean, there's a
Hmm.
question on that, but we're already on time, but I need to ask this question because there are like multiple questions on this topic. How do you do budget allocations? And that's an important question, because it all boils down to I have $100, whether I spend it on paid media or I spend it on events. And event, because it's like a one-time thing, people look at it like, oh, it'll be done and dusted. So if it doesn't go well, it's a high risk thing. So how do you think people should look at that piece? There's also a second absolutely unrelated question, but I would want to take that up. It is, if you take up a booth in an event, Are there any engagement activities that you should do and some ideas around those?
Oh my gosh, I love all of this. I listen. I am a marketer. I just happen to know that I work really well with sales organizations, and so I can't. I have to make sure people just don't have a good time. But I can give you all kinds of fun activation ideas because I love to have a good time, and I'm happy to share that. And when it comes to budget, I think for that. That's a tough one, but I would say like if you have a CRM, that's really important because if you do an event, you need to make sure that you're inputting all of those leads into
Mm-hmm.
some type of CRM. The worst thing that I see happen is that somebody has an event, they get the data export from the event organizer with all of the data, and then it just sits on the shelf, if you will. And the leads are not activated. Now that's been a wasted opportunity. When it comes to paid media, I think ultimately how many impressions you're going to have if people click. Um, Depending on cookies and things like that, you may or may not have tracking. So when you think about the CAC for paid media, I always say like with events, these are people who you ultimately say, hey, I want access to this audience. I participated in this trade show. I got access to the said audience. I got all these badge scans. Is that not a value that you got all of that data? They may not be ready to convert, and that's okay. But if you have marketing newsletters, you have webinars, you have these bespoke dinners and events, you already have a list of people who were your target market that you can start to work that, and you know who they are. Versus, in the paid media world, which I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm doing that right now for a client. It's it's just a little different. You're operating almost kind of blindly. And so you're trying to optimize your campaigns, based on that. So if somebody's going to pump $2 million in a paid media campaign, I would challenge that and say, what could events do for you with those same dollars?
Yes.
Because I think you could get much more value. But the key is that you have to activate on those leads. You do not let that list just sit idle, because that's where the mistakes happen.
That's so true. There's a question, but I think we're on time. Is like, should we target large scale conference or go smaller events first and build their way up? I think LaShanda has already answered that question, because it's like you need to look at your objective, and that objective has to be answered. What is your end goal objective from an event? And you very nicely answered a question that I had in my mind. That looking at events as a one-off thing is the problem. It is not a one-off activity, it's a longer thing. It's basically, I mean, there is a pre to it, like you said, there is a during to it, and there is a post to it, like post event. There's a whole list of
Mhm.
activities. And if you miss out any of these, then you don't get the full ROI out of the event. And the reason you feel that the event probably is high risk, because you're not doing the pre, during, and post correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong
That's
there, right?
right.
Yeah.
That's right. And one thing I didn't put a fine point on, but just figured I would do that, is that list that you got from the event. You could also share that with your paid media team so
Yes.
that they can then do targeted advertising towards those audiences. Um, we didn't talk about that, but when you start to layer that, and you're much more targeted in your marketing, the results, the customer acquisition cost, if you were to look at those audiences that you had access from an event and how well you converted them based on targeted marketing, I guarantee you
Yes.
it's going to outperform something that where you had no access to the audience. So there's also the layering strategy as well to make sure that those dollars are used much more effectively.
That's so true. I mean, this was such an insightful conversation. We talked about going solo to an event, just attending an event and having those conversations. Then we talked about setting up a booth. How do you put your objective? It is all about pipeline creation at the end of the day. And the scale of the event definitely depends on your budget and the goals that you're trying to solve for. It doesn't
Mhm.
matter how big or small you are, but what is your end goal and objective? I'll end this live, but with one last question, because we're talking about AI, and AI is everywhere. And what role do you think AI plays in event planning or all of this? And which AI tech stack do you swear by personally, which you love, the tools that you love?
Oh, this is a good one. Listen, I don't know that I would be an entrepreneur today if AI did not exist. Let's start there,
Wow, that's a big
right?
state. That would be
That's a,
that would be the starting cut of my video. I'm already telling you that.
I'm being honest because as a small business owner, if you think about the amount of things and hats that you have to wear, I think that it is a resource. I have always, like through the years, been accused of having a lot of stuff in my head.
Mm,
I am, you don't want to be inside of this brain. But AI has unlocked potential that I couldn't operate humanly, like with being able to out the level of output. Building the calculator that had been in my head for so long, and I was able to do that using AI to build all of that out. I'm not a coder, but
mm,
I was able to do that, and then I work with my developer to take it the rest of the way. So I say that because it's just a great unlock for people when you don't have a lot of resources and you don't have massive teams. When it comes to planning or things like that, I am a fan of Claude, but I also do use ChatGPT. I also use Perplexity,
mm.
and I use Google as well. So like, it just really depends on what you're doing, but ultimately Chat GPT sometimes I think is a great opportunity for you just to ideate and brainstorm. When I'm driving my kids to school in the morning, I am doing voice notes of
Yeah.
ideas and things that I have. And by the time I've gotten home from out of rush hour traffic, all my notes are there on concepts or activations or ideas or campaigns. And I couldn't do that before. It was lost time because I was in the car, right? And I think about that. Claude, with the artifacts and being able to build things very quickly, even if it's just like a proof of concept, a major unlock. The time I would take to build a presentation for a client or having to do a recap for an event or any of that, put all that data in there, put your branding, your templates and stuff, and you'd be surprised. Like you actually have a recap deck where if at the end of the event, it took you a week, 2 weeks to write it up, now you can upload, some of your stats in there, and now you have a recap. So I just look at that as like it's a major unlock. It saves you time, and we all have lives outside of work. And that gives me time to spend with my family and take care of the whole person. And that was something I did not do well back in the day.
That's such an amazing and wholesome answer, honestly, because you're really using the best parts of AI and like trying to get time out. And that's the emotional sell that AI does save time if used correctly. If you don't use it for if you don't try and fill your day with the additional tasks just because you have AI, but actually save time and spend that where it really matters with family or on yourself. I mean, time for yourself, most important thing. Um, we extended this live by good 13, 14, 15 minutes almost, and thank you so much because it felt like we were in the flow. There were so many audience questions coming in. Legit did not have to look at the question that I had prepared, but I managed to seep in the questions that I wanted to ask also in between. And I absolutely look forward to meeting you in person also. You're such a sweetheart. Thank you so much for taking
Aw,
the time today. Thank you so much for answering
thank
all
you
our
for
questions.
having me. I appreciate it. Enjoyed it so much.
Thank you. All right, guys. Thank you. Bye bye.